The last time Nicky missed a repayment, the loan sharks took his car. The next time, they assured him they'd take his knees. And these weren't the kinds of men who made jokes about their intentions. This was enough motivation to take the advice of his buddy Silvio, the advice that had him wandering down an unfamiliar back alley in the middle of the night. Silvio told him to watch for the sign. He'd know it when he sees it. Silvio said the guy was a miracle worker, someone who could make your luck do a 180 whenever he wanted. This miracle worker was the one who helped Silvio get back on his feet after his mother died, and now Silvio had a McMansion in the suburbs and a Mustang convertible. But could anyone be enough of a miracle worker to turn Nicky's luck around? He blinked, and he was in a dark room. He didn't remember walking into this room, but his memory had been spotty these days, probably a combination of the stress, the booze, and the uppers. The room was sleek and minimalist, dominated by 3 objects: a wooden chair, a grand mahogany desk, and another chair behind it. No, chair didn't feel like the right word. It was more of a throne, with a brass frame and royal purple padding. Nicky had this vague idea that someone told him to take a seat when he'd been led into the room, so he obliged, sitting on the more humble wooden chair across from the desk.
Run of bad luck, eh, Nicky?
The voice startled him, and he looked up to see a stranger now occupying the throne across the desk. He was a thin man with an angular face, dark hair slicked back, wearing an expensive-looking pinstriped suit. The man smiled. Something about him made Nicky itch.
I didn't tell you my name,
Nicky said.
You told my receptionist on the way in,
said the stranger without missing a beat.
Do keep up. So, what brings you to my little corner of the world? Nobody ends up across my desk if life's been a ray of sunshine.
Nicky scratched the back of his head, avoiding eye contact with the man across the desk. His dark eyes seemed to look right through Nicky, as though someone was standing behind him.
I made a few bad investments,
he said. The stranger's smile seemed to widen at that.
Investments? So that's what we're calling them, are we?
He really could see right through Nicky.
Some bad bets,
he clarified.
At the tracks. And then I borrowed some money and made a few more bad bets, and now...
His mind suddenly assailed by thoughts of beatings, mutilations, of his bullet-riddled body showing up on a riverbank somewhere.
I'm in some trouble.
The stranger opened a drawer in his desk and took out not a piece of paper, but what looked like a scroll of honest-to-God parchment, along with some Harry Potter-style quill pen and an inkwell. Nicky had to stop himself from laughing out loud at the absurdity of it.
Lucky for you, Nicky, trouble is my specialty,
he said, dripping the end of his quill in the inkwell.
No hole is too deep, that's what I always say. But when you're in that hole, you're really in no position to critique the rope that gets thrown down to you, are you?
He wasn't really sure he followed, but he nodded along anyway.
When your friend Silvio came to me, he was in a pretty rough state too. Expensive habits, that man. Fast cars, loose women, the indigent's chariot. Thankfully, I was able to get him on the right track. How is his mother?
Nicky cocked his head.
She died. Short illness, I think.
The stranger seemed to suppress a smirk at that, before forcing a sympathetic frown.
Oh, of course. How forgetful of me. So many irons in the fire, it's easy to forget a few.
The stranger began to frantically scrawl on the parchment, occasionally refreshing the ink on the quill's tip. Nicky couldn't make out the words from where he was sitting, but he had to admit that despite the speed at which the stranger was writing, his penmanship seemed beautiful.
I like you, Nicky. You remind me of myself in some ways,
he said, not turning his dark eyes away from the parchment.
The big difference is that you pick slow horses. I don't. Thankfully, I can help you there.
Nicky straightened up in his chair. He was worried that this would be yet another loan shark, offering him temporary relief in exchange for having another dangerous creditor. He'd learned the hard way that taking the Ponzi scheme approach to paying off loan sharks was a good way to get killed.
5 names,
the stranger said.
Horses, I mean. That's my offer. Long odds, too, so you'll get a big payout if you're willing to roll high.
How can you possibly know that? Nicky asked. The stranger paused and looked up. He spoke with such an eerie certainty that it genuinely chilled Nicky to the bone. The simple words,
I know.
There would be no follow-up questions.
And I'm fair,
the stranger said as he continued to write what must have been a contract on the parchment.
I'll give you 5 names, and in return, 5 names are all I ask for. Couldn't get more equitable than that.
5 names? Names of what? The stranger shrugged.
Books, movies, places, casual acquaintances.
Nicky had no idea why he was taking such an insane claim seriously, but some sour feeling deep in his gut told him that this was for real. He needed to make sure that he wouldn't get screwed here. No close friends, no family members, and I don't want to forget my name either. That made the stranger smile, enough to show off his strangely crooked teeth.
You're good. I knew there was a reason I liked you. You have my word. Those are all off limits.
The stranger's scrawlings had reached the bottom of the parchment, where he drew a straight line before turning the parchment around and pushing it across the desk towards Nicky. It outlined the exact deal they'd just discussed. The names of 5 winning horses in exchange for 5 names from Nicky, excluding family, close friends, and his own name. It seemed like a fair deal.
Just write you John Hancock across the line, and we'll be in business,
the stranger said.
This could be the first day of the rest of your life.
The part of him that had been brought up Catholic was screaming at him to tear up the paper and run out of the room. The part of him that didn't want to end up sinking in the local bay wearing the latest release from Nike Concrete knew that wasn't an option. Nicky took the quill and signed his name.
Good choice, friend,
the stranger said.
For once, you bet on the right horse.
Part of him expected it all to be some sick joke, until he bet what little money he had left on the first horse on the stranger's list. It wasn't the favorite, not even close, so when it won, and won big, Nicky suddenly had an incredible payout waiting for him. When he paid that money forward and bet on the second horse, he soon had a small fortune, enough to pay back the shark with interest. He took what's left to bet on the third horse, who once again won and tripled Nicky's fortune. Everything the stranger said had been true. Silvio's recommendation had saved Nicky's life and improved it beyond measure, but in all his excitement, Nicky never once wondered whether Silvio got back on his feet after his mother died, or because his mother died. If he had made that connection, he might not have made the deal, and his life might have turned out differently. Of course, the repayments were being made too. He couldn't even hope to remember the lead actor's name from his favorite movie. Even when he was staring at their IMDb page, the name was a fuzzy, unreadable mess. He looked like a moron in conversation when he couldn't remember the president's name either. But he was willing to take that hit to his pride in conversation as his bank account got fatter and fatter. And what felt a little petty, he lost the name Jack Daniels, and thus his favorite drink order too. With 2 bets left, the world was Nicky's oyster. After the 4th horse, his wealth became obscene, though he forgot the name of his accountant, which made keeping track of it all a little awkward. Still, there were plenty of accountants out there. He could make do. The last name on the list seemed almost to taunt him. He'd accumulated such wealth now that he didn't really need that last bet, and perhaps if he let that race lapse, he wouldn't lose another name. But the more he thought about it, the more it seemed like a deal he couldn't lose. One more incidental name, and he'd have more money than he could ever spend. He'd bankrupt the bookies and go home laughing.
Why not?
Nicky made that 5th bet and felt like a god when the horse that nobody else believed in cleared those gates like greased lightning. The winnings were astronomical. The terms of the deal were complete. Now, Nicky could celebrate. And that night, he really did. He bought a round for everyone at the bar and partied so hard he could barely stand, let alone drive. So that night, he decided to stagger home, singing to himself, knowing that from now on, he was living life on Easy Street. Except while wandering down one isolated street a few blocks from his home, he was accosted by a mugger with a .38 special. It seemed that Nicky was a little too slow to deliver his wallet, and before he knew it, he was laying out in the gutter with 2 bullet wounds in his torso, bleeding profusely. But as Nicky's luck would have it, the mugger didn't take his cell phone. He was able to wrestle it out of his pocket with fingers that were rapidly going numb and call the emergency services, saying that he'd been shot and needed an ambulance immediately. Please give me your location, sir, and we'll send someone right over, the dispatcher said with clear urgency.
I'm on...
Nicky's tongue seemed to stall in his mouth. It was so simple, he just needed to tell them he was on... Oh no. He couldn't remember the name of the street he was laying in. Sir? Excuse me, sir?
Oh no.
As the phone tumbled out of Nicky's hand, he could swear that somewhere he could hear the stranger from across the desk laughing as his eyes fluttered closed and everything went cold. One should never expect a positive result from a Faustian bargain, even if you've never read Marlowe or Goethe. Many civilians who made the mistake of encountering SCP-738, also known as the Devil's Deal, have learned this the hard way. To the untrained eye, this anomaly is little more than a collection of furniture, a simple chair in front of a mahogany desk with an ornate throne-style chair behind it. Without a human component, nothing anomalous would even occur here. But when you add a human element, inherently mired in biases, fears, and desires, a kind of terrible magic begins to occur. Any sentient being that sits in the unadorned chair will enter a negotiation with a mysterious and powerful entity that appears in the throne. What this entity looks like will differ entirely from person to person, but will always take a form that the person trusts. Interestingly, the being can only be viewed subjectively by the person in the negotiation. It remains invisible and intangible to any incidental observers. All we can see when studying interactions with SCP-738 are the parchment, the quill pen, and the inkwell floating out of the desk and seeming to write of their own volition. By the way, we have been able to collect some samples of the parchment and have since discovered that it's made out of human skin. Perhaps we shouldn't be surprised. Of course, as one can expect when making a deal with a being of a demonic nature, it generally isn't worth the human skin paper it's printed on. You'll get what you were promised to the exact letter, but what's taken from you, though, will often be substantially more, with the entity seeming to take a stereotypically sadistic pleasure in screwing over desperate people with cunning and malicious loopholes. Surprisingly, or perhaps unsurprisingly, depending on your perspective, SCP-738 was found in the office of a Catholic cardinal, a gift given to him directly by the then Pope in exchange for his extraordinary service. We don't have records of the deals made by the Pope or the Cardinal, but we do have documentation of 7 separate tests conducted by the Foundation using a mix of D-Class personnel and researchers. Further testing was ultimately halted, as the entity's incredible reality-warping powers made it far too dangerous to continue. It should be noted that all of the D-Classes used in SCP-738 testing are united by one factor: either incredibly stunted psychological development or scoring extraordinarily low on intelligence scores. This choice, while ethically questionable to some degree, was made with the intention of making sure that nobody with potential anti-Foundation intent would have the wherewithal to realize the destructive power they're being handed. In the first of the tests, a researcher sat on the chair, at which point a man in a red and gold business suit manifested and began making extravagant promises to make his research career an incredible success, to advance him to the position of the O5 Council. Thankfully for all of us, the researcher was able to recognize that all that glitters is not gold, and he sped out of the room, ending the deal before it could truly begin. Others who did not show his restraint were not so lucky. The next test was on a D-Class, who reported that the entity manifested as a beautiful and seductive woman. He was promised freedom from the facility in exchange for the death of his best friend, and took the deal. Another D-Class spontaneously died in the facility, and the one who'd taken the deal vanished. Of course, the entity hadn't done an excellent job of hiding him, so he was discovered and recaptured in a nearby town later that afternoon. At this point, it likely would have made sense to cut our losses and stop testing, but the lead researchers on the case decided not to go in that particular direction, and instead brought in another D-Class. This time, the entity offered him the power to never be held in containment ever again, in exchange for the memories of his deceased mother. The deal was accepted, and the D-Class was given monstrous strength, which resulted in a brutal fight that caused the deaths of 12 members of personnel, along with the D-Class himself. Researchers chose to put a particularly intellectually disabled D-Class into the testing chamber for the next one, and the entity seemed to take this as an opportunity to twist the knife. He tricked the D-Class into a deal for a delicious meal in exchange for the D-Class's comfort toy, a stuffed rabbit named Mopsy. When the deal was struck, a fancy meal manifested, and Mopsy disappeared, causing serious distress for the D-Class. Because he seemed so inconsolable, researchers invested in another identical rabbit toy to give to the D-Class. But as soon as he named the toy Mopsy, it disappeared again, as per the terms of the entity's deal. Due to the fact that that felt particularly mean-spirited, even for a demon, the Foundation decided to make the next test some good old-fashioned destruction testing, attacking it through various means. The only one that actually seemed to damage any of the furniture was an attack from an axe, which caused the attacker to immediately die after the first swing. The furniture has begun to slowly heal from its wounds over the coming days. In the next test, they hope to discover the identity of the being behind all this. A researcher instigated a new negotiation and asked simply, "Who are you?" In response, the entity took the form of a giant, terrifying snake and said,
"I'm sorry, it's against policy to divulge personal details."
He then offered something to the researcher that caused an immediate nervous breakdown. He's still in a psychiatric facility to this day. Perhaps the most interesting test of all was when the Foundation sent in Sheldon Katz Esquire, senior counsel with the Foundation's legal department. His extensive knowledge of contract law would put the SCP-738 entity against a foe on equal footing. This turned out to be a fascinating decision, as the entity appeared in the form of a particularly challenging law professor from Katz's undergrad course. The two negotiated for 41 straight hours, creating a contract of over 900 pages before Katz passed out from exhaustion in the middle of arguing the exact definition of the word shall. There were actually no adverse consequences to this, as the entity left a note in a red leather envelope reading, "Please come back anytime. I haven't had so much fun in years. Mr. Katz has not expressed interest in doing so." Thanks to the sterling work of the SCP Foundation, it's highly unlikely that you'll ever sit across from SCP-738 and be in a position where a bad choice of words irreparably destroys life as you know it. But if you do find yourself preparing to accept a deal from anyone soon, remember a little piece of advice from your good friend Dr. Bob. The devil's in the details.
Oh boy, that one really sticks with you, huh?
On a lighter note, one of my favorite voice actors, Joe Cliff Thompson, has joined a new project called Redacted. It's a paranormal investigation audio drama, and if you like these SCP stories or need a little bit more mystery in your life, I think you'll really like it. Incidentally, some people have mentioned that Joe and I sound a lot alike, but frankly, I don't know if I hear it. But don't take my word for it, though. Go and take a listen, and then tell me in the comments if you hear a similarity. And then go watch another entry from the files of Dr. Bob, like SCP-715, My Face That I May Be, another tale involving odd similarities between individuals.